If you were to somehow time travel and board a notoriously violent pirate ship in the year 1720, you probably have a very specific expectation of what you would find.
Oh, absolutely. Everyone does.
Right. Like, you are bracing yourself to step into a lawless mob of screaming thieves. You expect unchecked chaos, swinging cutlasses, and, men who looked at polite society, rejected every single rule, and decided to just sail the seas doing whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted.
Yeah, the classic Hollywood pirate.
Exactly. But the thing is, you wouldn't find that at all. Instead, you would likely find a group of heavily armed men sitting in a circle on the deck, quietly debating the finer points of their own constitution.
Voting on things, too.
Yes, voting on their CEO and enforcing a remarkably strict, 8 o'clock curfew. So today we are tearing down the Hollywood myth of pirate chaos.
It is arguably one of the most persistent historical myths we have in popular culture, really.
It really is.
Because the reality of life on a pirate ship was far more structured, deeply organized, and honestly, a much more fascinating study of human behavior than the fictional version of just, endless anarchy.
For this deep dive, we are pulling from an incredible piece of source material. It's a detailed historical analysis from a YouTube channel called Brick Buccaneers.
Great channel.
Yeah. And the video is titled Pirate Code: Real Rules or Just Rum Rumors? Our mission today is to explore the startling reality that pirates were actually highly organized, and we are going to unpack the specific, surprisingly draconian rules that govern their everyday lives.
It's a great mission because the truth is so unexpected.
Okay, let's unpack this, because reading through the facts presented in this source, the analogy that immediately slapped me in the face was that joining a pirate crew was not at all like joining a violent riot.
Not even close.
No, it was a lot more like signing a very rigid, legally binding remade agreement, or, sitting down in a windowless room to sign a strict corporate code of conduct on your first day at a new job.
What's fascinating here is the visual that the source material paints right at the beginning to shatter that illusion of chaos. The video asks you to picture a crew of pirates physically gathered around a piece of parchment.
Like a literal scroll.
Right, a scroll containing the articles of their ship. They aren't drunkenly arguing or fighting over the paper. They are actively, deliberately discussing and then agreeing to a set of rules.
Wow.
Yeah, that image alone completely upends the outlaw stereotype. When you have dozens of aggressive men willingly putting their signatures on a binding document before they even set sail, you're looking at a sophisticated system of order.
Or I guess drawing an X if they couldn't write, right.
Exactly, which was often the case. But the intent to be bound by the contract was there.
It's essentially HR onboarding for maritime thieves.
That's a perfect way to put it.
And moving past the general concept that they just had some vague, unwritten guidelines, the video really gets into the hard historical reality. The source specifically dives into the rules laid out by the infamous Captain Bartholomew Roberts.
Ah, yes. Very famous code.
And these were not gentle suggestions like, oh, please be a good shipmate and wash your own dishes. These were incredibly specific, intensely strict mandates that controlled nearly every aspect of their behavior.
They governed the absolute minutiae of daily life, which tells us that the captains and the crews understood the very real dangers of their environment.
According to the source, under Captain Bartholomew Roberts, there was a total zero-tolerance ban on fighting while on the ship.
Zero tolerance.
Yeah. If you had a dispute with a coworker, meaning a fellow pirate, you were forbidden from drawing a weapon on deck. On top of that, they had a strict lights-out policy. At 8 o'clock at night, the candles had to be snuffed out.
A literal curfew.
A literal curfew. And maybe the most mind-boggling of all, there was an absolute ban on gambling for money. Wait a minute, pirates ban gambling? Let that sink in.
It sounds absurd to modern ears.
It really does. You have a ship full of professional thieves, outlaws who hijack vessels and steal for a living, and they draw the moral line at a friendly wager over a game of dice. I have to push back on this a little bit.
Please do.
Like, why on earth would people who literally risk the gallows for gold care if someone wants to gamble away their own share on a Tuesday night?
Well, we have to look at the underlying logic here, rather than viewing it through a modern lens of morality. These are not buzzkill rules designed by some overbearing parent trying to keep the kids out of trouble.
Right, they aren't worried about their immortal souls.
Exactly. These are brutal survival mechanisms. You have to consider the physical and psychological environment these men inhabited. A pirate ship is a wooden pressure cooker floating in the middle of nowhere.
Oh, man, yeah.
You have dozens, sometimes hundreds, of aggressive, heavily armed men crammed into a space no bigger than a modern tennis court. And they're there for months at a time, eating bad food and drinking terrible water.
The baseline stress levels must have been astronomical, just off the charts.
Wow.
Every minor annoyance would be magnified 100 times over.
Exactly. So let's apply that to the ban on gambling for money. It has absolutely nothing to do with being upstanding citizens. It has everything to do with maintaining group cohesion.
How so?
Well, when pirates attack a merchant vessel, the wealth comes from the outside, right? They all profit together. But if they gamble for money on their own ship, wealth is simply transferring from one heavily armed, easily agitated pirate to another in a closed system.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it creates instant winners and losers within the exact same team.
It guarantees resentment. The loser of that dice game is now broke, angry, and staring at the man who took his money every single day in those cramped quarters.
That is a recipe for disaster.
It breeds immediate jealousy, paranoia, and eventually violence. By banning gambling entirely, Bartholomew Roberts was engineering a social environment that prevented the exact kind of internal friction that tears a crew apart from the inside.
So it's basically a policy of extreme risk management.
Precisely.
But, I mean, surely they found loopholes. If you tell a bunch of criminals they can't gamble for gold, wouldn't they just gamble for chores or maybe extra rations or the best sleeping spot on the deck?
You would think so, but the historical evidence suggests the codes often covered those loopholes too. Or, failing that, the quartermaster would just step in to squash it.
Really? They were that strict about it?
Oh yeah. The core philosophy was that any zero-sum game on a pirate ship was a threat to the ship's survival. Any dynamic where one crew member benefits at the direct expense of another was seen as a cancer to their unity.
Which brings us right back to that no fighting on the ship rule.
Yes, the anti-dueling clause.
The source details how seriously they took this. If two pirates had a legitimate grievance that could not be resolved, they couldn't just brawl by the cannons. They had to take it to land.
They couldn't risk damaging the ship or hitting a bystander.
Right. The quartermaster would literally act as a referee, row them to the nearest beach, and let them settle it with swords or pistols.
And even that process was highly regulated. The source outlines the typical dueling rules found in these codes. Often, it wasn't a fight to the death.
Wait, it wasn't?
No, the rule was usually first blood. The moment one man was significantly cut or wounded, the quartermaster declared the dispute officially settled, and both men were expected to drop the grudge immediately.
It's formal conflict resolution. That is wild. They are taking their beef to shore so a stray bullet doesn't hit a powder keg and sink the entire operation. It's not about being civilized. It's about not blowing up the office.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And the curfew serves that same operational goal.
The 8 o'clock lights out thing?
Right. If you want an organized, disciplined workforce capable of navigating treacherous waters or engaging in life-or-death naval combat at a moment's notice, you need a crew that is rested and alert.
Yeah, I guess a hangover is pretty bad when cannonballs are flying at your head.
Exactly.
Yep.
You cannot have half the crew staying up all night drinking rum and shouting below deck while the other half is trying to get their mandated sleep before their watch shift. The rigid structure proves the video's central claim.
That pirates were deeply organized because the alternative was death by incompetence. But looking at all this rigid structure brings up a massive contradiction in my mind. We are talking about outlaws. These are men who frequently mutinied against their captains in the British Royal Navy, right?
And very often.
Or they fled awful conditions on merchant vessels, specifically to escape strict rules, bad food, and terrible treatment. Why would they willingly sign a document that forces them into curfews, bans gambling, and regulates how they can fight?
It does seem counterintuitive at first glance.
But the source material actually gives us the answer, and it is a massive payoff. The pirate system offered them something in return for their obedience that was practically unheard of in the 18th century: absolute fairness and actual voting rights.
This is the crucial exchange at the heart of the pirate phenomenon. You surrender a certain amount of personal freedom on the ship, you agree to the curfew and the conflict resolution,
You play by the rules.
but in return, you get a system of economic and political fairness that simply did not exist for the average working-class person in traditional society at that time.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The video points out that every single person on that crew, from the captain down to the newest deckhand, received a predetermined, guaranteed fair share of the treasure.
A written contract to share.
And on top of that, crew members had the right to vote. The source makes this incredibly powerful, almost jarring point. Pirates actually had more democracy than most of the legitimate kingdoms of their era.
It's a stark contrast.
We are talking about a historical period when nations were ruled by kings and monarchs who claimed absolute power by divine right. The average sailor in a navy was treated brutally.
Often kidnapped into service, actually.
Yeah.
Practice called impressment.
Right. Paid pennies, whipped for minor infractions, and had zero say in the trajectory of their own life.
Compare that bleak reality to a pirate ship. Out on the ocean,
Yeah.
a floating wooden vessel operated entirely by criminals is functioning as one of the most robust democratic societies on Earth.
It's the ultimate, actually functional group project. The video even jokes that pirates managed to run their operations better than most college group projects today.
I wouldn't disagree with that.
But how did that democracy actually play out on the deck? It wasn't like they had, private voting booths and ballot boxes.
No. The mechanics of it were wonderfully straightforward and transparent. When a major decision needed to be made, the crew would literally gather on the deck and vote.
Like, what kind of decisions?
Whether to attack a certain ship, where to sail next, or how to handle a unique dispute. They'd vote usually by a simple show of hands or a vocal shout.
Oh, wow. Just a direct democracy.
Very direct. Every fully inducted member of the crew had one vote. And the captain's vote counted exactly the same as the cook's vote.
Which fundamentally changes the power dynamic. The source mentions that the captain wasn't a dictator, he was an elected CEO.
Essentially, yes.
And if the crew didn't like how the captain was leading, they could just vote him out. What actually happened when a captain got fired by his own crew?
Well, in the naval or merchant world, mutiny meant bloodshed and hanging. But in the pirate world, a vote of no confidence was often just a procedural demotion.
A procedural demotion?
Yeah. If a captain was deemed cowardly in battle, or if he was caught taking a larger share of the treasure than the articles allowed, the crew would hold a vote. If the majority wanted him gone, he was stripped of his title.
And they wouldn't just toss him to the sharks.
In many cases, no. He wasn't thrown overboard. He simply picked up a mop and went back to being a regular deckhand while the crew elected someone else to take the helm.
That is amazing. Imagine being able to just vote your terrible boss back down to an entry-level position. That level of political agency is astounding for the time period.
It really was revolutionary.
It really reminds me of how modern startups operate in the tech world. Think about it. You have all these different pirate ships operating in the same industry. The captains are basically startup founders.
That's an interesting way to frame it.
And just like startups competing for the best software engineers, pirate captains were competing for the most skilled sailors and gunners.
If we connect this to the bigger picture and stretch that startup analogy further, the articles, the scroll they sign at the beginning act as the company's benefits package and culture deck.
Yes, exactly. If a pirate captain is a tyrant or his ship's code is incredibly unfair, the best sailors are just going to jump ship at the next port.
They'll just take their skills elsewhere.
Right, they'll go work for a rival pirate captain who offers a better profit-sharing model and a more democratic work environment. The captains had to offer fair rules or they wouldn't be able to staff their ships. The market demanded democracy.
That economic pressure is exactly why this radical democracy was so necessary and so widespread. The strict rules, the curfews, the ban on gambling, those rules are only palatable to an outlaw crew because the crew genuinely bought into the system.
They had skin in the game.
Completely.
Yeah.
In a tyrannical kingdom or on a harsh navy ship, you follow the rules because you are terrified of the guy with the whip. But on a pirate ship, you follow the rules because you actively helped write them, you voted on them, and you have an actual tangible financial stake in the enterprise.
It's the profound difference between being a minimum wage employee who hates the company and being an equal shareholder who wants the company to succeed.
Precisely.
When everyone gets a fair cut of the Spanish gold, suddenly the success of the ship is directly tied to your own personal wealth. You aren't just following orders, you are protecting your own investment.
It really forces you to reevaluate who the actual tyrants were during that era.
Right.
The outlaws are holding open democratic elections and enforcing equitable profit sharing, while the civilized kingdoms are ruling by force and hoarding all the wealth at the top.
So what does this all mean for the poor guy who actually does break the rules? Let's say I'm a pirate, I've signed the scroll, I'm getting my fair share of the treasure, I have my voting rights. But one night, I lose my temper and I pull a knife on a crewmate over a piece of salted pork. What happens to me? And for that matter, did every single pirate in the world just adhere to one massive, universal pirate constitution?
The source is very clear on this. No, they did not. There was no centralized governing body for pirates.
Oh, okay. So no pirate United Nations.
No pirate UN, definitely not.
Yeah.
There was no universal rule book that applied to the entire ocean. Every single ship operated as its completely own sovereign entity with its own highly specific version of the code.
So decentralized governance on the high seas. One ship might have the super strict 8 o'clock curfew, while another ship might be a little more relaxed about drinking as long as you show up for your watch.
Exactly.
But across the board, no matter which ship you were on, the stakes for getting fired for breaking those specific rules were unbelievably high.
Yes. And the flexibility of these codes, the fact that they varied from ship to ship,
Hmm.
actually demonstrates a very high level of organizational intelligence.
How so?
Well, it proves the rules weren't just arbitrary traditions passed down blindly from generation to generation. They were tailored to the specific needs, the specific risk tolerance, and the specific culture of that particular crew.
But we have to talk about the enforcement. Because a rule is completely meaningless on a ship full of armed criminals unless there is an equally extreme system of consequences. You can't just call the local police.
No, you are entirely on your own.
The source lays out the punishments, and they are chilling. If you break the code, you might lose your share of the treasure entirely. But the ultimate punishment for serious offenses, like stealing from a crewmate or deserting during battle, was marooning.
Marooning.
Being left behind on an uninhabited island.
Marooning is a deeply fascinating psychological and practical punishment. When you operate completely outside of traditional societal law, you don't have infrastructure.
Right. There was no pirate jail below deck.
You can't just lock someone in a cell and feed them for 6 months while they take up valuable space and consume precious rations.
That makes sense. They couldn't afford dead weight.
And you also have to consider the morale of the crew. If a crew member proves they cannot be trusted, if they steal from the collective pot or start a violent fight that puts the entire ship in jeopardy, they are a literal liability to the survival of the group.
They had to go.
The crew has to remove the threat. But executing a crewmate directly on the deck, hanging them or shooting them in front of everyone, carries a massive psychological toll. It brings the violence of the state, the very violence they fled onto their own ship.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it taints the whole democratic vibe.
Exactly. So marooning solves the problem perfectly from an organizational standpoint. By leaving the offender on a deserted spit of land, the crew physically removes the threat without getting blood on their own hands.
The source details how brutal this actually was. It wasn't just dropping someone off at a tropical resort. The standard protocol was to leave the marooned pirate with a small container of water, maybe a tiny bit of food, and a pistol containing a single shot of powder and lead.
It's grim.
The psychological torture of that single shot is incredibly dark. It's the crew saying, we aren't going to kill you, but we are giving you the option to do it yourself when the starvation gets too bad.
It is harsh. It is undeniably brutal. But in a completely lawless environment, it is an incredibly effective enforcement mechanism.
Really it.
It guarantees that the code has actual teeth. Every man on that ship knew exactly what awaited them if they betrayed the collective trust.
Like follow the rules we all agreed upon or face the absolute ultimate consequence. It's extreme accountability. And looking at all these mechanics really brings us full circle on this entire deep dive.
I agree.
We started by asking you to picture that chaotic, screaming outlaw swinging from the rigging, causing reckless destruction just for the thrill of it. But the ultimate reality check from the source material is that the chaos is a complete fabrication.
A total myth.
The historical reality is that pirates were incredibly organized, they were highly disciplined, and when it came to their internal politics, they were surprisingly fair and democratic.
Because they recognized an essential truth. Long-term success and basic day-to-day survival absolutely requires order.
Even outlaws need rules, and I think that's something you can really apply to your own life. Think about your own workplace or the last massive group project you had to manage.
Oh, definitely.
Whenever you get a group of human beings together to achieve a difficult goal, the only thing that prevents total disaster is a clear, mutually agreed upon code of conduct. If 18th century pirates figured out that they needed ground rules, profit sharing, and conflict resolution to function smoothly, maybe we shouldn't be so surprised when our own modern teams completely fall apart without clear expectations.
It's a profound realization when you view it through that lens. And I think it raises a very important question, something really worth pondering long after we wrap up this deep dive.
What's that?
Well, we look at these pirates as individuals who explicitly and violently rejected the laws of the societies they were born into. They abandoned the royal navies, they abandoned the rigid class structures of the kingdoms, they fled the authority of the state entirely,
Right. They burn those bridges.
Yet the very first thing they did when they were completely free and alone on the vast empty ocean was naturally and immediately form their own strict, democratic, and fair rulebooks.
Huh.
Consider the alternative. They could have just lived in the chaos, but they didn't. If the people who most fiercely reject the law immediately recreate a system of justice just to survive, what does that reveal about human nature's deep, almost inescapable inherent need for structure, fairness, and a code to live by?
Wow. That completely changes the way you look at that classic image of a pirate, doesn't it? He's not an agent of chaos at all. He's just a guy who really, really believes in his localized, highly democratic roommate agreement.